Ok anh John, sau khi mình hoàn thành cái primary flight training và mình được chọn để có thể bay jet, helicopter hay là turboprop, thì cái bước kế tiếp là như thế nào vậy anh?
So like you mentioned, right, they call it a selection process. And a lot of it depends on the time at which you select, your class selects. If we have a requirement, if the Marine Corps or Navy has a requirement for a jet trainee or a multi-engine trainee or helicopter trainee, naturally, most people ask for jets. There are some who want to do nothing else but fly helicopters, and some who want to do nothing else but fly multi-engine. So it depends on the class.
Thì bây giờ đó, nếu như mà lúc đầu em sign up là em muốn fly jet, nhưng mà cái điểm của em chỉ có thể cho em lái helicopter thôi thì sao?
Yeah, so remember the NSS, the composite score I mentioned? There's a minimum requirement that the services put out for you to qualify to be a jet trainee. If you don't meet that, then you automatically are in the pipeline for helicopters. There's also a minimum requirement for multi-engine platform, at least for the Marine Corps. So you kind of have to meet all of those to be eligible to be considered for those platforms. If you don't meet and you pass, meaning you have a minimum composite score to graduate from primary training, then you will by default select helicopters.
Vậy em không thích helicopter thì em có thể back out ra được không?
You can, they call it DOR, drop on request at any given time. But keep in mind though, the services don't look too kindly on people who just drop because they're not happy with becoming helicopter pilots. I don't recommend that. I think that yes, certainly everybody should go to jets. That's what I flew. But that doesn't mean that helicopter pilots is less of a platform. It's just something different.
Tại vì jet thường là lúc cool, ai nhìn vào cũng thích fly jet.
Yeah, I mean, that's what everybody grew up watching. But there's some people I know, I have friends of mine who went in and their fathers were Huey pilots or Cobra pilots, and that's all they wanted to fly, nothing else.
Cool.
And I think that's cool.
And bây giờ mình được chọn một cái platform rồi, thì cái bước kế tiếp nó sẽ là như thế nào?
So just to be clear about this selection process, in a class that graduates for Navy Marine Corps, traditionally they don't have too many jet slots, especially for Marine Corps. You have to consider that 80% of the Marine Corps aviation are non-jet, right? Very small. Navy is a little bit better, but still a few slots. So really the only thing that can guarantee you is you are the number one graduate in your class. So you've achieved the best scores in your class compared to the last 50 people, your composite score. And then you also have to have the luck of timing where the services have a jet slot available at the time when you select.
And what, like competitive?
It's very competitive. It's very competitive, and you have to have a little luck in timing as well.
Okay.
So once you select for the platform, it's a fun event, and I think we do have some members who just went through that process, and I'm in touch with them and talking to them all the time. Very excited for them. I think one of them is flying MV-22 now, and another person is getting ready to go to helicopter training for the Navy. So.
Rồi còn về cái training đó, hồi đó anh cho là jet thì người ta gửi anh tới một cái base mà chỉ train jet only. Thì anh cho flight jet 18, F-18 đó, thì anh cho train F-18 immediately hay là sao?
No. So once you finish primary and you select jets, for Navy and Marine Corps you can go to one of two bases. You can either go to Meridian, Mississippi, or you can go to Kingsville in Texas. Both of those bases fly T-45, and it's called the intermediate and advanced stage at the same time. It's kind of sequential, but that's where you go and you begin your introduction to jet plane. I flew the T-45, as do most naval aviators, in Kingsville, and it actually is quite a different stage. It's a big leap because you go from this T6, in my case T-34, with not a whole lot of power, to all of a sudden you go into a jet engine. It's faster, everything comes faster at you, you fly higher, you can pull more G's, etc.
thì cái khoảng thời gian từ khi mà mình tốt nghiệp cái primary cho tới khi mà mình hoàn thành cái jet training đó thì nó khoảng là bao lâu?
It depends again on the time. A lot of it has to do with the pipeline. I know like a few years ago the jet pipeline was delayed significantly because of a maintenance issue with the T-45. The engine had some issue, so that delayed the pipeline. And then a few years before that, they had an issue with O-Box that also delayed the issue because people couldn't fly as many events in a day. But you know, going from primary to advanced, you have to move. You have to what we do call a PCS, right? Permanent change of station. So say you're coming from Pensacola, Milton for primary, and then you get sent to Kingsville, Texas. You've got to do a whole entire move, and you got to find an apartment. You got to move. If you're married, kids, you have to move your family. So the process takes at a minimum a month. But traditionally, I've heard anywhere between 3 to 6 months right now for students who finish primary and get indoctrinated into jet training.
Vậy là cái người pilot student đó bây giờ người ta đang là một officer rồi, minimum là second lieutenant.
Right.
Thì ngoài cái việc bay ra, chỉ ăn, ngủ, học,
So
vậy thôi.
you're a commissioned officer, but you are in training, right? So there's absolutely no requirements. You do not have a job other than being a student. A lot of them go into what we call a pool. So when they check into a weights training, they go into a student pool, and then they can be assigned various jobs, like being a front desk officer, or being the guy who writes the schedule, or being on duty, being a watchstander, as we call it. But their primary job is to learn the aircraft that they're going to fly, learn the procedures, learn the manuals.
Trong cái lúc mà mình training cái jet đó, em nghĩ là cũng có rất nhiều bài test để
That's right.
filter
Yeah.
nhiều người hơn.
So, this is probably the first time you've done a altitude chamber, right? This is probably the first time where you've learned about, turbojet or turbofan aircraft, right? It's a lot of the ground school is repeated for the jet specifically. And along the way, every class, every test, you have to pass.
Nói về jet đó, thì em biết là mình phải pull G rất là nhiều. Em coi trên video thấy người ta bỏ mình vô một cái lồng, có cái cây rất là dài, người ta xoay rất là mạnh.
Yeah.
Đa số nhiều người đó là người ta pass out hay là xỉu. Thì làm sao để một người mình có thể training cái bản thân mình để mình cải thiện hơn?
Centrifuge training is what you refer to. The Air Force has a requirement to go up to 9 Gs. Navy Marine Corps, I think only 7.5. I can't remember. But we go through the same place to do the training. What can you do to prepare yourself? It's hard. It's hard to explain. But being physically fit is the number one. Because you have to squeeze your muscles starting from your toes all the way up to your butt, all the way up to your stomach, to be able to maintain the blood pressure up in your brain while under G.
Vậy là cái đó là mình có thể training mình được cải thiện được, chứ không phải là born like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, it's funny because a lot of my friends who weren't like myself, weren't familiar with flying, they never flew anything prior to military training. They did better because they were taught a process and they just applied it.
Ta vừa nói về làm sao để get into jet, thì anh Choi có thể nói trong cái jet training này thì cái người student học được những gì ở trong đây?
Yeah, so once again, you begin your phase just like the same thing we did in primary, and crawl, walk, and run phase. So a lot of ground school, typically learning about the jet characteristic, and up to the FAM stage, and then learning how to be able to fly the airplane by yourself. And then you progress from that to getting your instrument rating, to then doing basic formation flying, and graduating to we call it tactical formation flying, where you learn how to fly in a 1 mile abreast, and be able to maneuver and remain in place. Then you progress from there to what we call the air-to-ground phase, where you learn how to do basic bombing, and you're dropping these Mark 76, which is a training bomb. It's about the size, and we can show a picture up here. We call it the blue bomb, right? The blue death. You go out to typically El Central at that point in time, and do those basic training. Do low levels. You do formation low levels, and then once you get through that bombing phase, they also award like the top bomber based on your scores and accuracy. So it's a very fun phase. Then you go on to the fighter phase, where you basically learn the basic principles of dogfighting, right?
Vẫn dùng cái máy bay
T-45.
T-45.
Now there's no radar and there's no weapon system, but the principle is just geometry and physics. Right? You're learning the basic principles of dogfighting, along with multi-airplane engagements. Once again, very basic. And then from there, you go into the final stage for Navy and Marine Corps, which is qualification at the carrier. So we call it CQ phase. And this is a very long phase, where you learn not only the process and procedures to fly around the boat, but also learning how to fly by yourself, how to do takeoff and landings on a carrier during the daytime.
Là anh lên cái carrier, anh học tại đó luôn.
That's right. So you start at the field first. You do field training first.
Cái simulation.
Yeah. So Navy, Marine Corps, every single base have what we call a lens, carrier lens, at the field, and we have a carrier box that's painted on the runway, and you go out there with a landing signal officer, your instructor, who is on the radio with you, telling you about glide slope control and glide path control, right? So then you are flying what we refer to as ball flying techniques, AOA control, power to move your glide slope, and you're trying to be as accurate as possible and respond correctly to the LSO's commands. Once you qualify the field, then you go out and you do it on a boat under daytime condition. Now it's important to remember that you're all by yourself. The first time you go out to a carrier, for real, you're by yourself. Your flight lead is an instructor. He takes you out and you're flying on his wing. But once he drops you off in the carrier, it is completely on your own.
Nhưng mà em nghĩ là khi mà cái point người ta đưa anh ra cái real carrier rồi, thì lúc đó cái người student rất là well prepared.
Very. By then, I think through primary, you've had about 60, 70 hours in the T6. By that point in time, you've had about 130 hours in the T45. You've flown, like I said, by yourself many, many times. You've done like formation flying by yourself. You've done tactical formation flying. You've done bombings in a multi-ship element, by yourself. You've done like a very dynamic dogfighting by yourself against an instructor. So yeah, you're very well prepared at that point in time.
Những cái người chỉ có jet pilot mới training cái carrier hay là helicopter and turboprop không?
The helicopter pilots don't do it in the training phase. They do it later on when they get to the fleet assignment in the aircraft in particular. But that's separate, and I'm not too familiar with that phase. But for jet pilot, at least when I went through, I don't know if it's changed. The carrier phase, it was the last phase before you get your wings and become a naval aviator.
Nếu fail cái phase đó là coi như là xong rồi.
Yeah, so traditionally you get 2 chances.
Okay.
The first chance, and if you DQ or disqualify, then they put you back through training again, and then they try to get you to the point where you can qualify. Now, does it happen? Yeah, I've had a few friends who failed twice, and they were not able to become pilots anymore, so they went on to do other jobs.
Cái đó sad ha. Gần tới cuối rồi.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not something you want.
Vậy là sau khi mình pass cái career đó rồi, thì cái bước kế tiếp là như thế nào?
So then once you pass, and provided you completed all the other phases and all the training, then you graduate and you get your wings of gold.
Wings of Gold. John, cái Wings of Gold đây đúng không? Yeah, right there.
Yeah, so it looks like, and I'm not the first. Certainly, we have some more famous Vietnamese than me,
Yeah, đây là cái Wings of Gold.
Certainly have other Vietnamese who flown. I'm certainly not the first jet pilot. We have many.
Và anh cũng không là người last jet pilot.
No, hopefully not.
Sure.
Certainly, hopefully not. Like I said, I have a lot of young Vietnamese who have joined the services, and I've talked to a few of them and mentoring them through the process. And I hope they all make and get the jets or the platform of their choice.
Đó là cái lý do mình cũng làm cái video này.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we
Cho
want
mọi
to
người
help
biết
each other
hơn.
out.
Rồi sau đó là anh được cái wing rồi, có nghĩa là anh phải có commitment with Navy.
That's right. So remember, you've just got winged and you are a pilot now, but there's one more step, right? It's to select the platform. So for the Marine Corps, at the time I went, it was easy. There was a F-18, AV-8 Harriers, or EA-6B. But now I think it's all F-18s or F-35s.
Okay.
And I think the F-35s are breaking down to B and Cs.
B, C.
For the Navy, I think it's all F-18s or Growlers. So all Super Hornets, which is awesome.
Nhưng mà anh nói là cái F-18 đó mình cũng phải là top one của class.
You know what's funny? For the Marine Corps, the grade cutoff, the highest grade cutoff was for Harriers. It's a very difficult jet to fly, so they want students who had a certain grade. So it was harder to get Harriers than to get F-18s. But the Harrier didn't have afterburners, and it didn't land on an aircraft carrier. So when I went through at the time, everybody wanted F-18s. So by default, the F-18s became the ones that you had to have the highest grade to compete for.
Bây giờ có lẽ là F-35.
I think so. I haven't checked with my friends, but I think everybody wants to fly the latest and greatest. So F-35 is.
Vậy bây giờ lúc đó anh John được assign bay cho F-18 thì mình sẽ làm những gì?
So once you complete training and you've assigned a training, you can go to a few different bases. Now it's changing, right? But in the Marine Corps at the time, you can go one of 3 places. For me, it was San Diego and Miramar. We call it for legacy training. Back then, there was a training with the Navy up in Lemoore, by Fresno.
Yep.
And then finally one in Virginia Beach, NAS Oceana. So those are the 3 training squadrons that could train a pilot, Navy or Marine Corps, to become legacy F-18 pilots.
Là vô cái F-18 là training everything to fighter, drop bomb,
fight. So it's just like flight school all over again.
Nó giống như là cái F-18 đó, bây giờ cái chuyện fly á, là bình thường. Mà mình phải turn cái F-18 thành một cái weapon.
That's right. So being a pilot is expected of you. You have to be able to be comfortable flying an airplane in instrument condition down to your absolute minimums as a pilot, and land all by yourself on basically day one. In the F-18, for example, the syllabus, once you get there, after you go through ground school and do all of the simulator training, where you learn about how to handle emergencies within the airplane, you have 4 flights, and then your 5th one is your check ride. And when I was an instructor, that's what we did. The first 4 flights was with an instructor in the back, right, to make sure that you were safe, to make sure that you could land an airplane and you could handle all the emergencies by yourself. And then the 5th ride was a check ride, that you, as a student, could show me that you can fly an airplane safely and you can handle any of the emergencies that happen.
Để vô được cái F-18 đó mình phải là top của cái class đó và top của rất là nhiều. Thì anh John thấy đó, nếu cái người nào mà vô được F-18 mà vẫn fail không?
Có. So I did a 3-year tour when I was an instructor in the F-18 school later on, right after my fleet tours, and I came back and I was an instructor. That's probably one of the saddest part, to see an aviator make it all the way to F-18. There are rated aviators now, they're pilots with pilot wings, and they owe the Navy and Marine Corps 8 years at a time, and they go through the training, but now we're asking them to learn tactics, a lot of tactics, and most of it is classified, so you can't bring it home to study. You have to study in the vault, and it's very fast-paced. Like you mentioned, you're flying old airplanes that have all kinds of emergencies happening all the time. You have to know the airplane systems inside and out because your life depends on it. And then at the same time, you have to learn new tactics, from dropping bombs, from dumb bombs to smart bombs, to shooting the gun on a target on the ground, to flying in a multi-element formation as a wingman, to doing like now actual BFM or basic fighter maneuvers. That's not scripted, right? You're flying a fighter and you're expected to learn the tactics, whether it's air to ground or air to air.
Vậy là sau khi mà mình hoàn thành cái F-18 training đó là mình pass hết, mình được chạy vào một cái squadron.
Yeah, so like I said, it was sad to see some people who couldn't make it all the way through, and then although they are pilots, they either, if they're lucky, get recycled to fly a different platform. A lot of them go to MV-22s or a multi-engine platform. But if you pass all the way through, then you are now assignable as an fleet operational pilot.
Okay.
So in the F-18, there were a couple of different bases in the Marine Corps you could go to. You could stay in Miramar and fly those F-18s within the squadron, and we have single seat and 2-seat squadrons. You can go to Beaufort in South Carolina, or you can go to Japan. Now, since then, it's changed. I don't think Japan has an F-18 permanently assigned squadron anymore. And of course, the F-35 is coming online, so that's going to be the way of the future.
Chúng ta vừa cover hết là làm sao để trở thành một người pilot in the US military. Sau 20 năm làm fighter pilot thì anh John có cái gì muốn gửi tới những cái bạn trẻ đang muốn trở thành một người fighter pilot?
Yeah, I was fortunate. I spent 20 years, most of it, actually almost all of it, in the cockpit, and I flew the F-18s my entire career, and still managed to get promoted along the way. I did spend like a 1-year tour as a forward air controller on the ground, so I feel very fortunate. I think for the people who want to come in, they have to have a love for aviation, and then they've got to be dedicated to the point where you're going to spend a lot of time. And I think it's very hard on the families because you move quite often. I was stationed in South Carolina and in San Diego, in Japan, pretty much everywhere. And you move a lot. You spend a lot of time building your craft to become a lethal fighter pilot, to become a good officer, right? Because that's what you get promoted.
Cái lý do mà em có cái video ngày hôm nay interview anh John là bởi vì thứ nhất, anh John lớn lên tại nước ngoài, Pháp và Việt Nam, chứ không phải tại Mỹ. Thì em nghĩ là có rất là nhiều cái bạn trẻ bây giờ không phải lớn lên tại Mỹ, tại vì lớn lên tại Mỹ thì nó quá là dễ dàng rồi. Người Mỹ người ta cố gắng một thì mình phải cố gắng gấp đôi, gấp 3, gấp 5 lần để được cái thành quả như người Mỹ, nhất là trong cái lĩnh vực quân sự nó rất là cạnh tranh như vậy. Thì hy vọng sau cái video này các bạn trẻ có thêm nhiều cái động lực, motivation để mình thấy anh John không phải là người đầu tiên là người fighter pilot và cũng sẽ không phải là người cuối cùng trở thành fighter pilot, có thể đó sẽ là bạn.
Yeah.
Thì hy vọng các bạn thích cái video này, và nếu như có nhiều cái câu hỏi chi tiết hơn á, thì join group Vietnamese in Aviation và để lại những cái câu hỏi mà bạn quan tâm, thì chúng mình sẽ cố gắng trả lời cho các bạn. Anh John, cảm ơn anh John. Hôm nay cái buổi interview này rất là nhiều cái thông tin và những cái motivation quý báu cho nhiều bạn trẻ. Thì chúc anh John luôn luôn mạnh khỏe, tiếp tục bay và truyền cái cảm hứng cho cái thế hệ tiếp theo. Cảm ơn anh John.
Ok, cảm ơn các bạn xem cái video này. Like Francis said, we hope to see anyone who's interested, take the step. And as always, as much info as you can provide and get us as a community to succeed in the services and as a pilot will be very, very rewarding.
This year I will make this goal become a reality. I won't talk about it anymore. I can. I can. I can.